What's up, Wizards? Dev here from MtG. Good to see you again. Today, I got something super special for you. We've only done this one other time. We're going to do it again here today. Every couple of months, we're going to try to do this. This is the State of Standard number 2 for, what are we, May 2015? Yeah, this is the top 5 decks in the Standard format for May 2015. Had to let Dragons of Tarkir really infiltrate the format for a minute, and then see what happens. And I think that the format is pretty well established right this second. We just got another month and a half until Magic Origins comes out and screws everything up again. So let's go ahead and kick it off for now. This is number 5. Number 5 is Atarka Red. Atarka Red is a lot like Mono Red aggro, except it just adds green mana so it can cast Atarka's command and just blow you out. Also deal damage to the head and all kinds of stuff. You can't gain life for whatever reason. So Atarka's command is really good, especially in a deck just like this, which is your basic Foundry Street, Dragon Fodder, Hordling Outburst thing that then just takes advantage of Atarka's command. This is a fantastic deck. Honestly, I think it's a little bit better than the Mono Red variants that we see. And let me go ahead and introduce you to the system we'll be using in this video, and hopefully in the videos to come. I want to know what you guys think about this. This is our 10-point grading system. As I go through this deck, I will explain a little bit about what each of these categories mean. First of all, power for this deck, we're going to give it a 3. The power means the overall power level of the cards that we're playing in this deck. When the power level of the cards is honestly fairly low. They just all come together pretty darn well, honestly. Just the entire idea of this deck is turn count. Turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, you're doing things very aggressively. And yeah, you're just building up to a large scale command that makes all your dudes a little bit bigger, lets them through, and deals 3 to the dome for that matter. Speed. This deck is obviously a speedy deck. Speed is this deck's specialty. We'll give it a 9 because it's probably faster than anything else on this list, all things considered, because it is tuned to be speedy and nothing else. Synergy. Let's give it a 6 in synergy. That is going to be the second highest number on this list. It is pretty synergistic. It all works together relatively well. Like I said before, now the cards are somewhat independent of one another. They don't need one another to work, but the cards happen to work well together. It is a fairly synergetic thing. Versatility is only a 4 in this deck. It is not equipped to deal with everything. It just wants to smash face as quickly as possible, and there are plenty of speed bumps that people can throw up in front of it. Every deck has 1 or 2, and whether it can get past those speed bumps determines whether it wins the game, but it is not entirely versatile because there's so much that can be thrown in front of it, and it is not good against everything in the format by any stretch of the imagination. Let's go ahead and give it a 3 in resiliency. Now this category is your ability to bounce back. Let's say your opponent plays an Anger of the Gods or an In Hostilities, wipes out your board. You've only got 1 or 2 guys and they, murderous cut it during your combat step after you've Titan Strengthened and you get 2 for 1. I mean, what is the deck's ability to bounce back from bad situations? This deck, not very good at that, it turns out. The deck wants to win off of its primary game plan in the first 4, maybe 5 turns. If it slows down. So, if the deck gets disrupted too much, it is very hard. The top decks aren't very good unless you're top decking Burn. And yeah, after 5-6 turns, if you haven't beaten them yet, your chances get significantly lower of winning the game at that point. Let's go ahead and give it a 9 in offense. Obviously the deck is incredibly offensively minded. That's all it wants to do, is be offensive. It really doesn't have that many defensive pieces. I guess you could argue Stoke the Flames and some of the Burn if you want to kill their creatures. But honestly, the deck is only killing their creatures so it can attack with its own, not to remove threats so much, but just so it can get its extra damage in incrementally. So the deck is all offense, and for that reason it gets a 3 in defense, because it really doesn't do much. Like I said, Stoke the Flames and some of the Burn is really all the help you're going to get in this thing. It cannot go over the top at all, and cannot stall the game or else it will lose. So no defense really at all. Game 1 and post board. These are honestly two of the most telling categories on the 10-point list. Game 1, it's very, very good. A lot of the decks in the format are equipped to deal with aggro, but much more so after board. So Game 1, you have a fantastic chance of winning, even against some of the stuff you have problems against. But after board, we're going to go down to a 5. It goes from 8 to 5. Because after boards, honestly, a lot of the decks in the format are equipped to deal with aggro, and you have a lot to worry about after game 1. So, yeah, and our final category is consistency, and it's a 9. This is, the highest on the list of 5 decks, because the deck almost always does exactly what it is programmed, built to do. You are going pretty much to play your Swift Spears and stuff first turn. You're going to play, Dragon Fodder, Hordling Outburst. These are things that the deck is fairly consistent at doing. You always have something on turn 1, turn 2, turn 3. You have options. The deck does what it wants to do very consistently. Overall, the deck is going to land at number 5, though, because it has such issues against some of the other decks that are very popular right now, namely Green-Red Dragons and Abzan, and after boards, it just really has a problem beating control variants. Blue-Black Control, Blue-White, and Esper, especially the Dragons version of Esper. So it sure has good game 1, but after that, your chances of winning plummet. So I wouldn't recommend necessarily this is, in the top 3, but I will say this is easily the most budget option on the list. The last thing I'll be looking at for each of these decks is probably going to be budget. This deck really doesn't cost hardly any money to make. Now, it's got Goblin Rabble Masters in it, don't worry. So it's not like it's going to be the cheapest deck ever either. We've done budget decks that are less expensive, but for a top tier, Pro Tour level deck, this honestly is only going to cost you, $70 to $100 maybe, something like that. I mean, that's a pretty fair deal. So yeah, if that's what you're into, and I like swinging guys sideways and casting burn spells, and a lot of people are into that. So Atarka Red may be the deck for you. Now let's move on to number 4. Number 4 is Bant Heroic, and we see this a lot, and I actually thought about moving it on up the list past number 4, but the other things that we see are just more consistent on the whole, and honestly, more expensive cards usually makes for a better deck. I hate to admit it, but it's mostly the case. And this is the other budget option on this list of 5. This won't take you that much money to make in comparison with the top 3 decks. So yeah, let's go ahead and hit it. Power is a 2 in this deck. Obviously the creatures in the deck are not that powerful to start off with. The overall power level of the cards we're using is quite low. We're using a lot of commons and uncommons. But again, they come together very well. I think this is the highest synergy number on the list. Now, speed is an 8. It's a little bit not quite as speed-oriented as, say, the Mono Red or the Atarka Red decks, but it is very speed-oriented, and you'll have huge dudes by the third turn almost every game. So that's pretty good. Synergy is an 8. Very synergistic deck, synergetic deck. Needs the other cards to make, other cards work. You need your 1-drop, 2-drop, but you also need all your auras and instants and stuff like that to really make this deck tick, to make your guys big, to get them through the line. So yeah, it is very synergetic. It needs all the pieces to really get rocking, but it's not hard to get all those pieces, to be honest. Versatility is a 5, a little bit better than the last deck we looked at, but again, really has a problem dealing with the top of the top tier decks in the format, and that's going to hurt it in this score. Resiliency is a 5, a little bit better than the last deck. Resiliency is okay. It does hurt to get 2 for 1 in this deck. That is a big thing that you're really not looking forward to. You put an ordeal on a guy and it doesn't immediately pop when you attack. If they can remove that guy, they 2 for 1 you, and sometimes they can 3 for 1 you in this deck. So there are ways that it is not, it doesn't bounce back very well. There is a problem where, just like most aggro decks, you empty your hand too early, and then you're relying on top decks, and that can become a serious issue and slow you down way too much for this deck to really even function. But it is slightly more versatile than the last deck in that it can deal a little bit better with some of the heavy hitters like, say, Abzan or Sultai even. More mid-rangey decks, this deck is a little bit better against. But one could wager that Mono Red or Atarka is better against control than this deck is straight away. So, pros and cons in that case. But Let's move on here to offense. The deck is very offensively minded. It's an 8 in offense because it's mostly what you're going to be wanting to do, but it does get a 5 in defense because these are guys that after you get them big enough, you can hold back, and you have an awful lot of combat tricks to make them second guess attacking into your dudes. So a little bit better on the defensive end than, you know, just a straight up mindless sort of, I hate that term, but an aggro deck that doesn't have to make decisions, even though it does. But in any case, let's move on. Game 1 and post board. Game 1 is an 8, just like the last deck, and post board is a 6, a little bit better than the last deck. This deck is really unique and has an awful lot of tricks up its sleeve, and so it can be pretty unpredictable and gets a little bit better post board because of that. It's also not quite as well known or predictable as, you know, as mono red and something like that. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a slightly better score, but honestly, you're still in trouble post board. And finally, consistency is a 6. This is the deck's big issue. This is the lowest number on the list. Honestly, if you don't get all the sort of disparate pieces for things to work, it won't work. Honestly, we talked about how synergy is very important in this deck. Very synergetic deck, but if you don't get those pieces, you're going to have some trouble. And honestly, you need so many disparate pieces at times. You know, I need my favorite Hoplite, then I want a Defiant Strike him after I put an Ordeal on him, you know, and that's 3 cards, and that you're not going to get that all the time on one guy. And then again, if you get Murderous Cut or, you know, Hero's Downfall or something after you cast that Defiant Strike, then you just got 3 for 1, and that really hurts. So, but like I said, the budget end on this deck won't cost you too much to make at all. Just look at it. It may be the most budget option on the list, honestly. So yeah, and it's a whole heck of a lot of fun. I mean, if you want to laugh maniacally, this is the one. I mean, with mono red aggro, you're just swinging at dudes, and we've all done that before. But you're making huge guys. You're making them more or less unblockable. You're gaining 10 life every other turn. You're drawing cards. Like this deck is really, really fun. And Dromoka's Command, this is the deck for Dromoka's Command. It's just unbelievably overpowered in this thing. So I would suggest probably trying this out. Now, it has won more than one event in the last month or so and did very well at States, sort of the breakout deck of States. So I definitely suggest Ban Heroic. But let's go ahead and move on to number 3. Number 3 is Green-Red Dragons. Now, here's where we get into the really serious-ish, you guys. Green-Red Dragons is very well equipped. Let's just go over its ratings real quick. Power is a 9. Definitely. Deck plays some of the absolute most powerful cards in the entire format. We got your Storm Breaths, we got our Thunder Breaks, you know, we got a Tarka in there, we've got Crater's Claws, we've got Sylvan Caryatid, which is a powerful card in this format, to say the least. So, power level is unbelievable in this deck. Speed is going to be an 8, which is, you know, the same. This is ostensibly a mid-range deck, but the speed is so high because all you really want to do is play an Ash Cloud Phoenix or a Thunderbreak Regent, preferably the Regent, on turn 3, and you're sort of golden. Like, if you can then on turn 4 play a Storm Breath and just run off the back of those 2 guys, then you're probably going to win the game. Let's move to Synergy. Synergy is a 4. That's not a terrible thing. It gets a little bit of synergy because it needs its mana producers in order to really run the way it wants to run. So we can count that as synergy, but deck doesn't really need other cards to make it good. You know, Thunderbreak Regent is good without Stormbreath Dragon. Stormbreath Dragon is good without Thunderbreak Regent. But having both of them out is certainly great. It's a little win more, but if they try to target either dragon, they're taking 3 to the dome. So yeah, they're both good with each other, but they do in no way do they need one another. And Atarka is just unbelievably ridiculous, and there are ways to cast him on turn 5, or excuse me, turn 4 in this deck. So honestly, the speed in this thing is unbelievable, and the synergy, like I said, doesn't really, I mean, if you can resolve a Tarka on turn 4, you really don't need any of those other dragons. Honestly, you can more or less win the game off the back of that, and it recovers very well. We'll get to that. Versatility is a 6. It's a little better equipped than some of the stuff that we've seen here. It's a good mid-range deck with a lot of powerful creatures, so it is very well equipped to deal with, say, aggro, because it plays such big guys so fast, and it's fairly equipped to deal with opposing mid-range decks, because it'll play their guys faster than the other mid-range decks and sort of be able to outclass them quicker. So yeah, it's got a lot of things going for it, definitely in the versatility category. And resiliency, we'll give it a 7. Not the absolute most resilient thing ever, but definitely better than, you know, the majority of aggro decks because it has such good top decks in it. I mean, honestly, if you get, you know, Cruxofated, well, actually, yeah, if you're Cruxofated, they name dragons, that's the thing. In hostilities, something like that, you know, you get your 2 big dragons removed or something, then you can always just top deck another ridiculous threat because they're all over this deck. So yeah, fairly resilient deck. Its offense is a 9, incredibly offensively minded deck. But that doesn't to say that it has bad defense. As you can tell, it's got a 6 in defense because, again, it has such big creatures and it plays them so fast. And it does pack some removal there too. In game 1, the deck is a 7, and in post-board, the deck is also a 7. Which isn't to say that the deck has a bad sideboard or anything. It's just that pretty much anything, like for instance, aggro will get slightly better, and so will control variants, but only slightly, honestly. I think that it's so well equipped game 1 to take down a lot of different things in the format that post-board, you don't really get hurt that badly, to be honest. It's about the same. If there were half a points, then I would probably give it a 6.5 post-board, honestly, because it doesn't have the absolute best sideboard ever, and but again, it's fairly well equipped to deal with everything just right out of the gate. This is the deck that you will sideboard the least while you're playing, even more so than aggro, because in aggro you're still going to be siding in your roast and a lot of other stuff. So yeah, and your other aggro guy. So yeah, I would say this is about the same. Game 1 is board, maybe post board slightly worse. And then let's move on to the final category in consistency. Consistency is a 7, again a 7. You see a lot of fairly average, just a slightly above average scores for this deck. And it sort of rides that whole philosophy. It has issues against control. That is a problem. That is a bugaboo of its. But very consistent deck, very versatile deck, and has a high power level. So it'll earn number 3 on our list. But this can win you the whole thing pretty easily. So from here on out, pretty much any of these decks can take first for you fairly easily. Number 2 right now is Esper Dragons. Esper Dragons has been getting a lot of attention lately from people that write articles. Daily MtG, Channel Fireball, it was on Wizards.com, there was a thing on Star City about it. I mean, getting really a lot of play, Esper Dragons is. LSV and a couple of other people think that it's the best deck in the format right now. That was a little bit before States that article was written, though, so I think that things have shaken out differently. Overall power level in Esper Dragons, we're going to give it a 9 as well. Really plays just all of the craziest cards in the format. A Jutai is really good. We've decided that Drifting Death is good. Of course, Ugin, probably the best card in the format for overall power level. And just ridiculous other things. You know, obviously Dig Through Time might be in the top 3 cards in the entire format. Lots of articles written about Silumgar's scoring lately. Crux of Fate is universally played. You know, just every other card you look at is something that we've all decided, you know, universally is a good card. Its overall power level is a 9, but its speed is a 1. Obviously, it's a control deck. It is in no way worried about speed. It plays the highest amount of tap lands in the format, highest amount of counterspells, highest amount of removal. So it really doesn't care how fast it is, as long as it can take control of the game and win eventually, whenever it feels like it, whenever it has control. Soft lock. So it really is in no way concerned with speed. It's the opposite of Vin Diesel. And so, yeah, a 1 we'll give it, but power level is super high in this deck. All control players will know what I'm talking about. Synergy is a 3, like I said. The deck, you know, like I said with a couple of other decks, the deck does not need all of these disparate parts to run, really. It just wants to counter spells, remove creatures until it can get its win condition on the board and protect it, ride it out. So it doesn't really worry that much about synergy at all. It doesn't need it. On to versatility then. That is the deck's bread and butter. Versatility for control is a 9. Now, the only reason it's not a 10 is because it does have some problems against some of the aggro stuff that we see, just because aggro is so ridiculously fast right now. But after board, really just throws aggro around. It ragdolls aggro. So it has some issues, but you know, there are decks that either are too fast for it or play just far too many threats for it to reliably deal with, honestly. And that's probably what the #1 deck does to beat control. So we'll give it a 9. And it's very, very versatile. That's why it plays nothing but counters and removal. So let's go on to resiliency. Also, a 9. Another hallmark of control decks is that they can go down to 1 life and still win the game. Control players, again, you know what I'm talking about. How many times you've been at 2 life, you stabilize, win the game. And this is 10, 12, 15 turns of you being at 2 life, and you win the game. So that really is what control decks are known for. This one, pretty good at that, because just there's so much premium removal right now, and the counter spells are good too. So yeah, pretty good at resiliency. Offense is a 3. We're looking to, just like I said, draw a win condition, ride it out, but we are in no way offensively minded. The only reason that the number is as high as a 3 is because the offensive cards we do have are so good. Ojutai and Silumgar are just off every chain. They're off the chain wallet. And it's just ridiculously good creatures and defensively minded creatures, but their offensive sides are good enough to give this a 3. Why not? And then in defense, we'll give it a 10. Because that's what control decks do. They are defensive decks. And this deck does it very well. You know, everything from Thoughtseize to Hero's Downfall to Dissolve, Crux of Fate. I mean, these are all cards that are meant to defense. So, and game 1, we'll give it a 7. Very strong deck, game 1, because it stabilizes well, but post-board, it gets a 9. Probably the best deck in the format post-board, because it just, you know, again, that's what it's made to do, is specialize against other decks. And its board is, I mean, that's what a sideboard is for. So I would almost give this a 10, but we'll give it a 9 something in post-board. And then consistency, we'll give it an 8, because you have, by design, a lot of turns to draw everything you need. You have a lot of dig, you know, a lot of variants play Anticipate, a lot of variants play 4 copies of Dig through time, so you will have a lot of chances to get the cards you need. Very consistent in that way. Plus it plays many copies of the things that make it a control deck, i.e. removal and counter spells, so very consistent. And budget-wise, it's going to cost you a good amount of money, honestly. Just the land base is expensive, and a lot of the stuff we see at Jutai is really creeping up there. Even Drifting Death and especially Ugin, obviously, are pricey cards. I definitely suggest this deck, and so does Luis Scott Vargas, a pretty important figure in the Magic community. So listen to him, I would say. Finally, you probably guessed by now, Abzan Midrange, we'll call it. Now, there are 4 different variants of Abzan going around. Abzan Midrange, Abzan Aggro, Abzan Control, and Abzan Megamorph. We're specifically going to talk about Abzan Midrange here because it is the one that wins the most. This deck, honestly, there was, for instance, there was a Star City Super Invitational Qualifier. That's what it was. Just a week or so ago, at the recording of this video, and the top 4 decks were all a variant of Abzan, and there was another one, I think it came in 6th or 7th, so yeah, 5 out of the top 8 are all Abzan decks. Abzan is ridiculously strong right now, has been for the entirety of the format, and this is no different. Its power level is a 10, just Ari Lax, he famously said he sort of popularized Abzan. He famously characterized the deck as playing every good card in the format, and it still does that. So we'll give it a 10 because that's exactly what it does. It just plays every single good card unapologetically, and yeah, they're good. So speed is going to be a 7 now. Usually, if you'll notice, 10 and 7 are very high numbers to go together. Now, Green Red Dragons had a 9 and an 8, very high numbers, but you can bet that if those 2 numbers are very high, the deck is going to be very good. So a 10 and a 7 in power and speed, respectively. Synergy is a 4. Again, it doesn't really need all the disparate parts to work together. Its versatility is a 9. Really equipped to deal with almost everything in the entire format. A large amount of removal, and more importantly, a ridiculous amount of threats. Every other card in the deck is a threat, and that will honestly harm any deck that it plays against. It's bad against, you know, that's crazy against control, and it's crazy against aggro, and it's crazy against other mid-range decks. Let's go ahead and give it an 8 in resiliency. Really doesn't care if it loses its creatures. It's going to draw into more stupid crap that it's going to have to play and you're going to have to respond to. I mean, a lot of 2-for-1 potential in the deck, a lot of value. It's just really value.deck is what we're looking at here. Its offense is a 9, but it's not even that offensively minded. Now these two numbers here, offense and defense being a 9 and an 8, really, you know, that right there tells you why this is, I think, the best deck in the format. Not only is it extraordinarily high offense, you know, you've got obviously your Siege Rhinos, your Tassiger, your Elspeth, you've got Sorens in here. There are just crazy offensive cards in the deck. Every other thing that you drop is dumb. But the defense is high. I mean, all those same cards I just mentioned are also the most, you know, some of the more defensive cards in the format. Just because they have such high toughness, or like Siege Rhino helps you make up the difference that you've lost from aggro. So those two numbers being so high, a 9 and an 8, is I think what makes this deck the deck to beat in the format. Just those numbers are too high, which people will probably argue those numbers are too high, but I think so. Game 1 and Game 2. Game 1 is an 8 and post board is an 8. Both because Game 1, you are so versatile, you're so well equipped to deal with so many things, and then your board is also very strong as well. So honestly, it's not like you lose any ground between Game 1 and Game 2, because not only are you very, very strong Game 1, but you're very strong Game 2 because your board is packed to the gills with some pretty impressive stuff for this format, honestly. A consistency of 8. Yeah, again, the deck always does what it wants to do, for the most part. Very consistent deck. And like I said, the power level of the cards that you're using is so high that it sort of can't help but be a consistent deck, because no matter what you choose to do with your 3rd, 4th, 5th turns, it's going to be something pretty balmy that they have to deal with, you know. So, yeah, I definitely suggest this deck. I think it's the #1 thing in the format right now. Has been for some time. So, yeah, I really don't think anything's changed from Khans of Tarkir. Obviously, the deck uses a couple of pieces from Dragons of Tarkir, but really not much in the overall philosophy of the deck has changed. So, yeah, those are our top 5 decks for May of 2015. Let us know what you guys think. If we missed anything, I know Jeskai is a very, very popular deck right now. A couple of other things, you know, green-white, sort of manifest or morph, very popular too. Dev from MtG. If you enjoyed this content, remember to like, share, comment, subscribe. These things take 2 or 3 seconds, and they really help our channel a lot, and we appreciate it when you do. So, like I said, Dev, MtG, maybe Tony will do one of these videos. Be looking forward to that. Our next deck tech, I want to do something I think you might be excited about. Grixis Control. And I think that this deck is actually very good. So just let us know how you feel about everything we talked about. Like, share, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching, Wizards.